To the truth, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the polite applause for my son's fiancée, Chloe, like a razor. Every eye in that fancy Mountain Lodge restaurant turned to me. I held up my phone, its screen casting a cold light on my hands. Across the room, Chloe's perfectly practiced smile tightened at the edges. My son, Mark, just looked confused. Chloe just gave a beautiful toast about becoming a new mother to my grandson, Sam, I said, keeping my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. And it's a beautiful picture. But I'm a retired nurse, and I've learned that sometimes you have to look past the pretty picture to see what's really going on. I nodded towards Sam. He was sitting at the table, a small watch-like device on his little wrist. You know that new health monitor, doctor? Evans asked Sam to wear tonight. It's not monitoring his health. It's a medical-grade air quality sensor. A murmur rippled through the guests. I tapped my phone, and the live data from the sensor instantly filled the projector screen meant for a slideshow of the happy couple. It was a simple graph, with one enormous angry red spike. This, I said, pointing to that jagged peak, is the spike in airborne chemical pollutants in the air my grandson was forced to breathe just 3 minutes ago. It's timestamped to the exact moment you came back from the restroom and gave him that big, loving hug. I locked eyes with her, the woman who was supposed to join my family. That isn't a hug, Chloe. That's an attack. And the data doesn't lie. But that explosion, under the warm lights of a rehearsal dinner, was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for months. To understand how we got there, you have to see how it all began. It all began, as these things so often do, with my son trying to put his life back together. After he lost his wife, Sarah, my wonderful, vibrant daughter-in-law, a part of my son, Mark, was just hollowed out. Grief is a thief that doesn't just steal the person you love. It steals the light from your own windows, leaving you cold and dark inside. For 2 years, he was just a ghost in his own life, a great father to my grandson, Sam, but the laughter was gone from his eyes. Then came Chloe. She was like a sunrise after a long night, all bright colors and dazzling energy. She was what they call a lifestyle influencer, which, as far as I could tell, meant her job was to have a perfect life and take pictures of it. Mark was captivated. And in the beginning, I honestly tried to be happy for him. I told myself that my son deserved a second chance at happiness, and if it came in the form of a woman who documented her every meal and mood for thousands of strangers, well, who was I to judge? This was the modern world, after all. Her online world was a place called Simply Chloe, and it was anything but simple. It was a meticulously curated fantasy. There were photos of her and Mark on a hike, his haunted eyes somehow looking joyful in the filtered sunlight, with a caption full of hashtags, number new beginnings, number mountain love, number finding my person. Soon, my grandson Sam started appearing in the photos too. There was a shot of the 3 of them at a pumpkin patch, all wearing matching flannel shirts. Chloe was holding up a perfect, round pumpkin, beaming at the camera, but I saw my grandson's face. The smile didn't reach his eyes. He was a prop in her perfectly staged life. Every weekend they spent together was turned into content. A trip to the Denver farmers market wasn't about buying fresh corn, it was a photo op with artisanal cheese and rustic flower bouquets. Number, farm to table, number, family adventures. A quiet afternoon reading in the park became a staged shot of Chloe reading a chapter book to Sam, her head tilted just so, the picture of maternal bliss. Number, stepmom life, number, making memories. She was building the image of a family, brick by perfect, filtered brick. But a family isn't a house you build for others to admire. It's a home you live in. You can't feel the warmth of a fireplace from a photograph. I tried to connect with her. I truly did. I invited them over for Sunday dinners, the way our family always had. But she spent most of the time on her phone, taking pictures of my pot roast, asking if I could move the gravy boat because it was ruining the composition. She talked about her brand and her engagement metrics, words that felt alien in a home filled with scuffed wooden floors and handmade quilts. My home is filled with what Chloe would probably call clutter, but every object tells a story. On my mantelpiece, next to a faded photo of my late husband, sits a small, hand-carved wooden bird. It's smooth and simple, its wings half spread as if caught between resting and taking flight. My husband David carved it from a piece of aspen he found on a trail up in the Rockies. It was the same trail where Mark and Sarah had gotten engaged. He gave it to Sarah on her wedding day, a symbol of a love that was quiet, patient, and handcrafted. That little bird was the soul of our family's real story. It was our legacy, carved from the same mountains that held our happiest memories. Which brings me to that Saturday afternoon in July. The air was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and charcoal from the grill. I was hosting a little backyard barbecue, just a few neighbors and us. Mark and Chloe arrived, and within minutes, she had her phone out, narrating the scene for her followers. Just having a super chill, authentic family BBQ with my faves. She chirped, panning her phone across the potato salad and my neighbor's kids running through the sprinkler. I was at the grill, turning burgers, when I saw her walk inside. A moment later, she came back out, holding the little wooden bird from the mantelpiece. She held it up to the camera on her phone. "Look at this little vintage find, guys. So rustic," she said to her audience of strangers. Then she turned to Mark, her voice bright and careless. "Babe," she said, loud enough for me and everyone else to hear, "when we're married, are we going to have to find a place for all this sentimental clutter?" The sizzle of the burgers on the grill was the only sound for a second. I gripped the hot metal tongs in my hand, my knuckles turning white. It was the only protest I could make. That little bird wasn't clutter. It was his father's hands. It was his late wife's joy. It was my grandson's heritage. And to this woman, it was just a prop, a vintage find that clashed with her minimalist aesthetic. Mark, bless his heart, tried to smooth it over. "Chloe, honey, that bird is special to Mom. Dad made it for Sarah." She just laughed, a sound like ice cubes clinking in an empty glass. "Oh, I know. It's totally charming. I just mean for our house. We're going for a much cleaner vibe, you know?" She set the bird down on the edge of the picnic table, next to a bottle of ketchup, and went back to her phone, already forgetting it. I walked over, picked up the bird, and held it in my palm. Its familiar weight felt like an anchor in a rising tide of unease. I looked at this woman who was about to marry my son, a woman who could hold our entire family's legacy in her hand and see nothing but clutter. And that's when the first real cold spike of fear hit my heart. This wasn't about different tastes in furniture. This was about something much, much deeper. That feeling, that deep, cold dread didn't go away after the barbecue. It settled into my bones. For the next few weeks, I tried to talk myself down. I told myself I was being a cliché, the suspicious, overprotective mother-in-law who thinks no one is good enough for her son. I reminded myself that Mark was happy, truly smiling for the first time in years. Chloe was from a different generation, a world of aesthetics and online validation that I didn't understand. Maybe her comment about the wooden bird wasn't malicious, just thoughtless, different. I tried to believe that. I really did. But my instincts, honed by 40 years as a pediatric nurse, were screaming at me that something was wrong. An alarm bell was ringing in a distant room of my soul, and with every passing day, it got a little louder. The first crack in my forced denial came on a Friday night in late September. The phone rang just after 10, jarring me out of a book. It was Mark, his voice tight with a familiar panic I hadn't heard since Sam was a toddler. "Mom? Sam's having an attack. A bad one. We're at the urgent care on 6th Avenue. My blood ran cold. I was in my car in less than 5 minutes, the muscle memory of 1,000 late-night emergencies kicking in. Sam hadn't had a truly bad attack in years. We'd managed his asthma so carefully, following the action plan his mother and I had created. He knew his triggers. We all did. Strong chemical smells, dust, extreme cold. We had built a fortress of caution around his fragile lungs. When I burst through the doors of the urgent care, the first thing I saw was Chloe. She was sitting in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, looking flawless even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her hair was perfect, her makeup intact. She was on her phone, of course, her thumbs moving quickly across the screen. She looked up and gave me a smile that was meant to be reassuring but felt rehearsed. "Carol, thank God, he's in with the doctor now. They're giving him a nebulizer treatment. Don't worry, I handled it." Mark came out then, his face pale and strained. He hugged me tightly. "It came out of nowhere, Mom. He was fine at bedtime, and then he just started coughing, couldn't catch his breath." I turned to Chloe, my nurse's brain kicking into gear, running down the checklist. What was he doing before bed? Did he eat anything new? Was he exposed to anything? "Nothing," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "Just a quiet night. I even tried this new calming pillow mist I found online. It's all natural, lavender and chamomile. I thought it would help him relax in a new environment. She said it with such pride, as if she'd discovered some miracle cure. I know you guys have your old-fashioned plan, but there are so many modern holistic solutions now. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Lavender, chamomile. In my experience, all natural sprays sold on the internet were often packed with the exact kind of volatile organic compounds that could trigger an attack in a sensitive kid. But I said nothing. I just nodded and focused on Sam. He was small and pale in the big examination room, the plastic mask of the nebulizer fogging up with each shaky breath. I held his hand, whispering the same comforting words I'd whispered to hundreds of scared children in the hospital. As the medicine opened up his airways, his breathing slowly eased. The doctor said he'd be fine, but to watch him closely. The next day, I picked Sam up from Mark's apartment to stay with me for the rest of the weekend. As we got in the car, I was hit by a smell. It was a cloying, chemical sweetness that clung to Sam's hair, his clothes. It was the smell of fake lavender. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" I asked, looking at him in the rearview mirror. He just shrugged, his gaze fixed on the window. He was quiet, withdrawn. When we got to my house, I started to unpack his little dinosaur backpack, and there it was. A sleek, modern-looking bottle with minimalist lettering, Serenity Sleep Mist. I turned it over and read the ingredients list. Right after distilled water was fragrance blend, not essential oils. Fragrance. That's a catch-all term for a cocktail of synthetic chemicals. It might as well have said asthma in a bottle. I took out his pajamas. The smell radiating from the soft blue flannel was overpowering. I held them to my face, and the chemical sweetness was so strong it almost made me gag. This wasn't a gentle, calming scent. It was an assault. My grandson had been wrapped in a cloud of poison all night. A dark, horrible thought began to form in my mind, a thought so ugly I tried to push it away, but it wouldn't go. Driven by that gut feeling, I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and went to Chloe's Instagram page. And there it was, a post from the night before, time-stamped at 10:15 p.m., right when she must have been in the urgent care waiting room. It was a picture of the closed door to the examination room, artistically filtered in black and white. The caption was a long, rambling paragraph. "Being a stepmom is the hardest and most rewarding job in the world," it began. "You're terrified of doing something wrong, but you do anything to protect them. Had a major scare tonight with our little man, but we're all safe and sound now thanks to quick thinking, holding my breath until I know he is. Number stepmom life, number family first, number childhood asthma, number stronger together." The comments section was a flood of sympathy and praise. "You're a hero," one person wrote. "He's so lucky to have you," said another. "You handled that like a pro." I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. I looked from the photo of her performance of worry to the pile of chemically drenched pajamas on my table. She wasn't worried. She was curating the experience. She had found a modern, holistic solution, all right, a solution for her brand, a crisis to overcome, a story to tell, engagement to farm. My grandson's gasping breaths were just content for her feed. I closed the laptop. The quiet click echoed in the silent kitchen. That wasn't a crack. That was a chasm that had just ripped open right in front of me. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had ignored the obvious danger for the sake of her own narrative. She had wrapped my grandson in her brand, and he had almost suffocated. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my core that this was only the beginning. This was the beginning of a war I never wanted to fight. But sitting there in my quiet kitchen, with the ghost of that synthetic lavender hanging in the air, I realized a promise is a powerful thing. It's a debt of the heart, and it doesn't just fade away with time, it waits. And the promise I made to Sarah, my late daughter-in-law, was now calling in its marker. My mind flew back 6 years, to a night that smelled not of fake lavender, but of real antiseptic and fear. The memory is so sharp, it's like a piece of broken glass I carry in my pocket. We were in the pediatric wing of St. Mary's Hospital. The only light came from the hallway and the soft green glow of the heart monitor next to the crib, beeping out a rhythm that was far too fast. Inside that crib was my grandson, Sam, just a baby then. His tiny chest was working so hard, pulling in and out with a terrifying effort, a little wheezing sound escaping with every breath. He was surrounded by tubes and wires. a miniature Gulliver tied down by modern medicine. But the image that's truly burned into my memory is of Sarah, my strong, capable Sarah. This was a woman who ran marathons for fun, who could change a tire in the rain, who met every challenge with a wry smile and a can-do attitude. But in that moment, she was undone. She sat hunched in a visitor's chair, her runner's body coiled tight with a helplessness that was agonizing to watch. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and bloodshot, and she was chewing on her thumbnail, a nervous habit I had never seen before. She hadn't slept in 2 days. I was a nurse. I knew the sterile dance of this place. I understood what the doctors were saying about bronchial spasms and corticosteroids. I could translate the medical jargon into plain English for her, and I did. But I was also a grandmother, watching my only grandchild fight for every breath, and a mother, watching the woman who was like a daughter to me crumble with a terror I knew all too well. "I feel so useless, Carol," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm supposed to protect him. That's my only job. And I can't even protect him from the air." I pulled my chair next to hers and took her hand. It was ice cold. "This is not your fault," I said, and my voice was firm, the way it gets when I need to command a situation. "We didn't know, but now we do. Now we know the enemy, and when you know the enemy, you make a plan to fight back." The crisis passed. The medicines worked their magic, and by morning, Sam's breathing was deep and even. He was asleep, his little face relaxed for the first time in days. But something had changed in Sarah. The terror had burned away, leaving behind something harder, something forged in the fire of that fear. It was pure, unyielding resolve. "Never again," she said, staring at her sleeping son. "We can never be caught off guard like that again." That afternoon, when they discharged us, we didn't go straight home. We drove to a 24-hour Staples. The fluorescent lights of the store felt harsh and surreal after the dim quiet of the hospital. While a teenage employee restocked printer paper, Sarah was a woman on a mission. She bought a pack of multicolored 5x7 index cards, a set of fine-tipped permanent markers, and a small desktop laminating machine. We went back to my house and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I was now sitting with Chloe's bottle of poison. We spent the next 2 hours creating the Sam Asthma Action Plan. It was a masterpiece of maternal engineering. On a green card, under the heading Triggers, we listed everything the doctor had mentioned: dust mites, pet dander, cold air, and in big, bold letters, smoke and strong scents, perfumes, aerosols, cleaners. On a yellow card, daily medications, we wrote down his controller inhaler schedule. And on a bright red card, emergency, we detailed the exact steps for an attack, how many puffs of the rescue inhaler, when to call the doctor, and at what point to call 911. We listed every emergency contact, every address, the pediatrician's number, the number for poison control, just in case. "Laminated," Sarah said, her voice full of grim satisfaction as she fed the first card into the humming machine. "So it can't get ruined by a spilled sippy cup or a rainstorm, no excuses." We made 3 copies, one for her fridge, one for my fridge, and one to live permanently in Sam's diaper bag. When we were done, we were bone-tired, but we were armed. We had taken our fear and turned it into a fortress. Driving back to her house, she was quiet. When we walked in, the first thing she did was take a magnet and fix the red emergency card to her refrigerator door, front and center. Her eyes scanned the living room and landed on the mantelpiece, on the little wooden bird my husband had carved for her. She walked over and gently touched its wing. She didn't say anything, but I knew what she was thinking. That bird, that plan, they were the same thing. They were a promise of a safe home, of a love that was diligent and watchful, a love that did the work. Now, that memory faded, leaving me back in my kitchen. The laminated card was still on my fridge, its colors slightly faded after 6 years, a silent testament to that vow. And in my hand I held the evidence of its desecration. Chloe hadn't just used a spray. She had taken that promise, that fortress we had built with research and terror and love, and she had breached it with a cheap bottle of perfume and a self-serving lie. I looked at the sleek bottle, at its pretty, minimalist label promising serenity. It wasn't serenity. It was a weapon, and it had been aimed at my grandson. The cold certainty in my gut hardened into something else now. A plan, a promise must be kept, and a threat to my family must be removed. I took the bottle of mist and tucked it carefully into the back of a drawer. Not to hide it, to save it. You never know when you'll need evidence. Evidence is a funny thing. It's not just for courtrooms and police files. Sometimes, it's a receipt crumpled at the bottom of a trash can or the lingering chemical scent in a car. After I put that bottle of pillow mist away, I became a detective in my own family. My grandson's life was the case, and I was the only one who seemed to know it was in danger. I went to the local CVS and bought a small black moleskine notebook and a good pen. My nursing days had taught me the value of meticulous records. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen. My war room was my kitchen table, and my investigation began. I started a log, simple and clinical. I drew a line down the middle of the first page. On one side, I wrote, "Time with Carol." On the other, "Time with Chloe." Every day, I made an entry. Under my column, the notes were consistent. Lungs clear, good energy, ran in the yard for an hour. Under Chloe's column, a pattern emerged almost immediately, stark and terrifying. Wheezing by evening, lethargic, cuffed through the night, complained of a tight chest, low appetite. It looked like a medical chart for a slow, methodical poisoning. I knew her weapons were scents, aerosols, the invisible poisons of modern life, so I started hunting for them. One Tuesday, I called Mark and told him I'd accidentally left my favorite cardigan in the back of his car. He said, "Of course, just pop over and grab it." When I got there, I opened his car door and was hit by a wave of something so intensely sweet and floral it made my eyes water. This was new. Mark hated air fresheners. Sarah had been sensitive to them too. I looked around. There was one of those plastic gel things clipped to the air vent, oozing a scent called Hawaiian Breeze. In the center console, I found another one, still in the package. I took out my phone and took a picture. Evidence. A week later, I was at their apartment to drop off some library books for Sam. Mark was on a work call. Chloe was, as always, creating content, taking a video of herself arranging a ridiculously expensive bouquet of flowers. "I'm just helping Mark make this place feel more like a home," she said to me, but her eyes were on her phone's screen. While she was distracted, I gathered up the kitchen trash to take out, an offer of help she readily accepted. In the garage, I set the bag down, untied the knot, and carefully pulled out the top layer. And there it was, a long receipt from Target from 2 days prior. My eyes scanned the list. Extra Hold Hairspray 2-pack, Glade Air Freshener Linen Fresh, Shea Butter Scented Body Lotion. It was an arsenal. I laid the receipt flat on the concrete floor of the garage and took another picture. But the moment that erased any last, lingering shred of doubt in my mind, the moment that turned my cold investigation into a hot, simmering rage, happened at Sam's school book fair. It was a classic American scene. A noisy, overheated gymnasium smelling of popcorn and old books. Kids running everywhere, parents trying to juggle wallets and stacks of paperbacks. I was meeting Mark, Chloe, and Sam there. I saw them pull into the parking lot and I waited by the entrance. As they were getting ready to get out of the car, I saw Chloe check her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Oh, let me just fix my hair. The humidity is a nightmare," she said. And then I watched, my whole body going rigid, as she took out a can of hairspray from her purse. Inside that small enclosed car, she sprayed a massive, thick cloud of it, her arm moving back and forth in a wide arc. The cloud enveloped the back seat where Sam was strapped in his booster. I saw him flinch. And then the coughing started. It wasn't a little tickle. It was a deep, hacking, desperate cough, the kind that steals all the air from a child's lungs. I was at the car door before Mark even had his seatbelt off. I unbuckled Sam and pulled him out into the fresh air. His face was already turning pale. Chloe got out of the passenger side, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Oh, my poor baby," she cooed, reaching for him. "Are you catching a cold? There is so much going around school right now." She said it so smoothly, so convincingly. She had already written the story in her head. Sam, the sickly child, was acting up again. It had nothing to do with her. I didn't say a word. I was too furious for words. I just knelt, took Sam's emergency inhaler from the side pocket of his backpack, the pocket where it always was, and gave him a puff. His coughing slowly subsided. I stood up, and my eyes met Chloe's over the roof of the car. In that moment, we both knew. The pretense was gone. Her smile was brittle, a piece of glass about to shatter. My expression, I imagine, was pure ice. I knew what she had done. And she knew that I knew. There was no need for accusations. The truth was there in the space between us, as thick and toxic as the cloud of hairspray she had just unleashed. She had done it on purpose. It was the only possible conclusion. She wanted him to be a problem. She wanted him to be a burden. A sickly, difficult child is so much harder to love, so much easier to sideline. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote it all down in my little black book. The date, the time, the location, the brand of the hairspray, Sam's reaction, Chloe's exact words. I looked at the pages I had filled over the last month. The log of Sam's symptoms, the photos of the air fresheners and the receipts. It was a damning collection of facts. It was a clear pattern of abuse, hidden in plain sight. I had a case. A strong one. But it was all circumstantial. It was my word, my photos, my log, against the carefully constructed image of a loving fiancée and doting stepmom. Against my own son's denial. I closed the notebook. It wasn't enough. I needed something she couldn't dismiss as the ramblings of a jealous old woman. I needed something she couldn't filter, edit, or explain away with a clever caption. I needed proof. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. And I had a feeling I knew where I could get it. Before I went to a doctor, before I escalated this into something that could not be undone, I knew I owed my son one last chance to see the truth. He was a father before he was a fiancé, and I had to believe that the father in him would, if presented with the plain facts, choose to protect his son. I had to believe it. So I called him and asked him to meet me for coffee. Not at my house, not at his apartment. Neutral ground. A place where we could just be two adults talking. We met at a bustling coffee shop downtown called The Daily Grind. The air was thick with the smell of roasting beans and steamed milk. People were typing on laptops, having business meetings, living their normal lives. It all felt a world away from the ugly reality I was about to put on the table between us. I got there first and chose a small table in the corner, a little island of quiet in the sea of noise. I took out my black notebook, my phone, and from a folder, I pulled out the original, 6-year-old laminated copy of the Sam Asthma Action Plan. I arranged them in front of me like a lawyer preparing for trial. When Mark arrived, he was smiling. He kissed my cheek, commented on the long line, and seemed so genuinely happy to see me that for a heart-stopping second, I almost lost my nerve. Then I looked into his eyes and saw the same determined blindness I'd seen for months, and I knew I had to go through with it. "What's all this?" he asked, nodding at my little display as he sat down. "Mark," I began, keeping my voice low and even. "I need you to listen to me for 10 minutes, not as your mother who you think is being overbearing, but as a retired pediatric nurse who is deeply concerned about her grandson." His smile faded. He leaned back, a defensive posture I knew all too well, and crossed his arms. "Mom, if this is about Chloe again..." "This is about Sam," I said, cutting him off gently. I opened the notebook. I've been keeping a log. I turned it so he could see the 2 columns. This side is Sam's health when he's with me. This side is his health after a weekend with you and Chloe. Look at the pattern, Mark. Friday, clear. Saturday, a little coughing. Sunday, full-blown wheezing. It's here, week after week. And he glanced at the page for a fraction of a second and then looked away, out the window, as if the traffic outside were more interesting. "And I think I know why," I continued, undeterred. I slid my phone across the table, showing him the picture of the air freshener clipped to his car vent. "Your car is full of these. You know Sam is sensitive to these things. Chloe is just trying to make the car smell nice, Mom. It gets stuffy." He said it so dismissively, like I was complaining about her choice in music. "Okay," I said, taking a breath. I swiped to the next photo, the Target receipt. "Then what about this? 2 cans of extra hold aerosol hairspray, scented lotions, plug-in air fresheners for the apartment. These are all things that are known triggers." "She's a woman, Mom. Women use hairspray and lotion. She's just trying to make the apartment feel like a home. You can't expect her to live in a sterile bubble." He was parroting lines I could tell. These were arguments they had already rehearsed. This was it, the moment of truth. I pushed the notebook and the phone to the side and placed the laminated action plan in the center of the table. The plastic was slightly yellowed with age, the corners soft from years of being taken in and out of backpacks and purses. His late wife's neat, determined handwriting was still perfectly clear. "Do you remember this?" I asked, my voice softer now. "You and Sarah and I made this. Together, in my kitchen after that night at Street Mary's. We researched every trigger. We made a promise to that little boy that we would keep him safe." I tapped my finger on the top of the red emergency section. The first bullet point read, "Avoid all aerosols and strong scents." This isn't a mystery, Mark. This isn't about her being a woman or making the apartment feel homey. This is about cause and effect. This is about a promise. He stared at the card, at his late wife's handwriting. For a moment I saw a crack in the wall, his jaw unclenched, his eyes softened. But then he looked up, and the wall was back, higher and stronger than before. "So what are you saying?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You think she's doing it on purpose? You think the woman I'm going to marry is trying to hurt my son?" The question hung in the air between us, ugly and raw, and in his eyes I saw the heartbreaking truth. He wasn't asking because he wanted an answer. He was asking because he dared me to say it. He was daring me to cross a line he had already drawn in the sand. I chose my words carefully. "I think," I said, looking right at him, "that your son's health is not her first priority. Her image, her comfort, her brand, they all come first." That's when he broke. He threw his hands up in the air, scraping his chair back from the table. "I can't believe this. I knew this was a bad idea. You've never given her a chance, have you? Ever since that day with the stupid wooden bird." He stood up, his coffee untouched. His face was flushed with anger, but underneath it I saw fear. He was terrified that I might be right, and he would rather hate me than face that terror. "She is a good person, Mom. She is trying her best. You're just not used to her ways. You're stuck in the past." He grabbed his jacket. "I'm done. Don't bring this up with me again." "Oh." And then he was gone, leaving me alone at that small table in the middle of a loud, indifferent coffee shop. The wall of denial wasn't just a wall. It was a fortress. And the person I was trying to save was locked inside, a willing prisoner. I sat there for a long time, the smell of burnt coffee sharp in my nose. My heart was broken. I had laid the truth at my son's feet, and he had chosen to step over it. Slowly, methodically, I gathered my evidence. The notebook, the phone, the faded, laminated promise. I placed them back in my purse. They were no longer items for a discussion. They were exhibits. I had tried to handle this within the family. I had tried to appeal to the father. Now there was only one path left. I had to appeal to the facts, and I had to do it alone. I had to do it alone, but being alone doesn't mean you're without power. It just means you have to find a different source of strength. My son had rejected my love and my experience, so I decided to seek out the one thing he couldn't argue with: science. The next morning, I called the office of Sam's pediatric pulmonologist, Dr. Rachel Evans, and made an appointment for a routine follow-up. I told the receptionist that Sam had a few minor flare-ups, and I just wanted to get things checked out. It was, I suppose, the biggest understatement of my life. The waiting room of the pulmonary clinic was painted a calming shade of seafoam green. Posters on the wall featured friendly-looking cartoon lungs explaining how inhalers work. The air was clean, quiet, and smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol. It was a world of order and care, a sanctuary of facts in the messy, emotional war I was waging. I sat with Sam, reading him a story about a dragon who was afraid to fly, my purse sitting on the chair beside me. Inside it, my little black notebook felt like a lead weight. Dr. Evans came out to greet us herself. She was a woman in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a warmth that wasn't performative. It was just part of who she was. She had been Sam's doctor since his first bad attack 6 years ago. She knelt to speak to Sam, not as a patient, but as a person. "Hey, Sam, I saw your grandma's name on my schedule and was hoping I'd get to see you. How's that fastball of yours coming along?" Sam, who had been so quiet and withdrawn lately, actually broke into a small smile and told her about his baseball team. In the examination room, she was thorough and gentle, listening to his lungs, checking his oxygen levels. She moved with a calm competence that soothed the frantic edges of my nerves. When she was finished with the exam, she gave Sam a sticker and pointed him toward a small table in the corner with a bin of Legos. "Sam, my man, do you think you can build me a rocket ship while I talk to your grandma for a few minutes?" He nodded and immediately got to work. Dr. Evans sat on the stool opposite me, her expression open and attentive. "Okay, Carol, you said he's had some flare-ups. Tell me what's been going on." This was it, my one shot. I took a deep breath and pulled the notebook from my purse. I suddenly felt a wave of insecurity. What if she saw me as a hysterical grandmother, just like my son did? What if she just smiled politely and told me not to worry? I pushed the doubt aside. I was a nurse. I knew how to present a case. I opened the notebook and placed it on the small counter between us. "Dr. Evans," I said, my voice as clinical as I could make it, "I have some serious concerns about a pattern of environmental exposures Sam has been subjected to recently. I've been keeping a log." And then I laid it all out. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't mention Chloe's name. I spoke only of the father's residence. I presented the dates, the recorded symptoms, the direct correlation between his visits there and the onset of his wheezing. I showed her the photos on my phone of the air fresheners, the hairspray receipt. I spoke about the pillow mist incident and the book fair. I presented my case with the same dispassionate clarity I would have used giving a report during a shift change. Dr. Evans listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look at her watch. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on my notebook. She picked it up and read through my entries, her brow furrowed in concentration. She treated my log not as an old woman's diary, but as a credible medical document. And with every page she turned, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't crazy. The facts were the facts. When she was done, she closed the notebook and placed it gently back on the counter. She looked at me, and her expression was no longer just kind. It was deeply, profoundly serious. "Carol," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "this pattern is, as you suspected, extremely concerning. The temporal relationship between these reported chemical exposures and your grandson's asthmatic episodes is clinically significant. To be blunt, this is a dangerous environment for him." A wave of both relief and terror washed over me. The relief of being heard, of being validated. The terror of having my worst fears confirmed by a medical professional. "The problem," I said, my voice almost breaking, "is that my son, he's in denial. The person responsible, she has him convinced that I'm the problem, not the environment she's creating." I looked at the doctor, my professional composure finally cracking. "It's my word against hers. She's very convincing." This was the real reason I was here. I leaned forward. "Dr. Evans, is there any way to prove what's happening in his environment? A way to measure it? I need something no one can argue with. I need scientific proof." "Doctor." Evans was silent for a long moment, tapping a pen on her notepad. She looked over at Sam, who was happily clicking bricks together, oblivious to the conversation that would decide his future. Then she looked back at me, and a new light was in her eyes. It was the look of a problem solver. "Actually," she said slowly, "there might be something. My clinic is part of a pediatric research study for a new generation of environmental monitors. They're small wearable devices. They track airborne particulates, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and other potential triggers in the immediate vicinity of the child in real time. The data syncs to an app." My heart started pounding. It was perfect. It was more than perfect. It was a silver bullet. "Officially," she continued, her voice maintaining its professional tone, but her eyes communicating something deeper, "I could authorize one for Sam to monitor his environment to help us identify unknown triggers at home. It would be a simple data-gathering exercise for his patient file." She stood up and went to a locked cabinet, pulling out a small, sleek box. She opened it and handed me a device that looked like a modern smartwatch. "It's very simple to use. Just press this button to turn it on. The battery lasts for 48 hours. I took the device. It felt cool and solid in my hand. It felt like hope. As I was getting ready to leave, Dr. Evans put a hand on my arm. "You're a good grandmother, Carol," she said quietly. "And you were a damn good nurse." We didn't need to say anything else. We both knew this wasn't just a diagnostic tool anymore. It was a truth detector. I walked out of that clinic with my grandson's hand in mine and a secret weapon in my purse. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. I had an ally. And now I had a trap to set. Having an ally gave me a sense of profound relief, but having a trap to set gave me something else. A cold, hard sense of purpose. For the next 3 weeks, the little black device sat in my bedside drawer, a silent promise. I had the weapon, but a weapon is useless without the right time and place to use it. I needed a stage. I needed an audience. I needed a moment so public and so perfectly curated by Chloe herself that she would have absolutely nowhere to run when the truth came out. And then, I got the embossed invitation in the mail. Mark and Chloe were having their rehearsal dinner at the Evergreen Lodge, a ridiculously expensive restaurant up in the mountains with panoramic views and a wine list as thick as a novel. It was perfect. Chloe would be performing at her peak, surrounded by family and friends she was desperate to impress. It was her show, her stage. She would never, in a million years, see the betrayal coming from a quiet old woman in the corner. In the weeks leading up to the dinner, I played my part. I was the model mother of the groom. When Chloe called to ask my opinion on flower arrangements, I was polite and agreeable. When she sent me photos of her dress, I told her she looked beautiful. I was a ghost, a smiling, pleasant non-entity. I gave her nothing to suspect, nothing to fight against. I could feel her relax around me, confident that the old woman had been put in her place. My son Mark was relieved. He thought his wall of denial had worked, that I had finally accepted his new reality. He had no idea I was simply biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to tear that reality down to the studs. The evening of the rehearsal dinner arrived on a crisp autumn night. The air was sharp with the scent of pine. As I got ready, I stood for a moment in front of my mantelpiece and picked up the little wooden bird. I ran my thumb over its smooth, worn surface. I was doing this for Sarah's memory, for the promise we had made. But I was also doing this for Mark's future, and most of all, for Sam's next breath. I placed the bird back in its spot and went to retrieve my own weapon. Sam was staying with me that night so he could come to the dinner. Before we left, I sat him down on the edge of his bed. I held the sleek black device in my palm. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice light and playful. "Hey, sweetie," I said. "Dr. Evans has a top-secret mission for you tonight, if you choose to accept it." His eyes lit up. He loved spy games. "She has this new gadget," I said, showing him the device. "It's like a superwatch for scientists. She needs a special agent to wear it and test it out for her. It keeps track of the air around you to make sure it's clean and safe for your lungs. Do you think you can be her secret agent tonight?" He nodded enthusiastically, holding out his wrist. I fastened the strap, making sure it was comfortable. "There you go, Agent Sam," I whispered. "Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to just wear this and have fun. No one else can know it's a secret device. It's our secret, okay?" "Okay, Grandma," he whispered back, his face serious with the weight of his mission. He felt important, empowered. He had no idea he was about to be the star witness in the most important case of his life. The Evergreen Lodge was even more dramatic than I'd imagined. A massive stone fireplace roared at one end of the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the mountains against a deep purple twilight sky. A string duo played softly in the corner. The air was filled with the murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. It was the perfect backdrop for a perfect lie. Chloe was in her element. She wore a stunning backless white dress that probably cost more than my first car. She glided through the room, her laughter bright and loud, her hand always possessively on my son's arm. She was the star, the director, and the producer of this entire show. She greeted me with an air kiss that smelled powerfully of her signature perfume. "Carol, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Doesn't everything look just perfect?" "Perfect," I agreed, my own smile feeling like a mask. I found a small table near the back and ordered a glass of water. From my vantage point, I could see everything. I watched Chloe pose for photos. I watched her charm Mark's colleagues. I watched my son watch her, his face full of a desperate kind of adoration. And I watched Sam, who was dutifully playing on an iPad at his seat, a small, quiet boy in the middle of a loud adult world. I took out my phone and discreetly opened the app Dr. Evans had installed for me. It synced with the device on Sam's wrist. A simple, flat green line appeared on the screen, indicating the clean, crisp mountain air in the room. All systems were go. All I had to do was wait for Chloe to make her move. My stomach was in knots, but on the outside, I was a statue, a quiet grandmother, watching the celebration, blending into the background. An hour later, the main course had been cleared, and Mark stood up, tapping his champagne glass with a fork. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," he began. "We'd like to start the toasts." The room fell quiet. The music stopped. Everyone turned their attention to the head table, where Chloe sat beaming, the very picture of a radiant bride-to-be. The performance was about to reach its grand climax. I took a steadying breath and placed my phone on the table in front of me, screen side up. My trap was finally ready to spring. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the prey to walk into it. Mark raised his glass, his eyes shining with a happiness that was so real to him and so fake to me, it broke my heart all over again. He gave a beautiful, heartfelt toast to Chloe, to new beginnings, to finding a light in the darkness. The guests sighed and murmured their approval. I just sat there, my hands clasped around my glass of water, my gaze fixed on my phone. The line on the app remained a steady, reassuring green. Next, Chloe's maid of honor, a woman with the same manufactured brightness as Chloe, stood up. She told a gushing story about Chloe's authenticity and her fierce protective heart. I nearly choked on my water. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Halfway through the maid of honor's speech, I saw it, the moment I had been waiting for. Chloe gracefully excused herself from the head table, whispering something to Mark as she headed toward the back of the room, in the direction of the restrooms. My pulse quickened. My thumb hovered over my phone screen, making sure it wouldn't go to sleep. Here we go, I thought. Showtime. She was gone for maybe 2 minutes. When she returned, she seemed to float back into the room, a serene smile on her face. Even from across the room, I could smell the fresh wave of her perfume, a cloying chemical floral that was her signature scent. She didn't go back to her seat. Instead, she made a beeline for the table where Sam was sitting. He was focused on his iPad, a small island of digital distraction in a sea of adult conversation. Chloe glided up behind him and wrapped her arms around him in a big, performative hug, burying her face in his hair. The guests who were watching smiled. A few even said, "Ah." It was a perfect moment for her brand, the loving stepmom connecting with her new son. "Aren't you being the best boy for mommy tonight?" she cooed, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. But I wasn't watching her. I was watching my phone, and on the screen it happened. The calm, flat green line erupted. A jagged, angry mountain range of red shot up, peaking at a level marked hazardous. The air in my grandson's personal space had become a toxic cloud. The alarm on the app didn't make a sound, but in my head it was a screaming siren. Got you. The proof was captured, time-stamped, and undeniable. She finished her hug, straightened her dress, and returned to the head table just as her maid of honor was finishing her toast. Then it was Chloe's turn. She stood up, dabbing a perfectly feigned tear from the corner of her eye. She gave the performance of a lifetime. She spoke about the challenges of stepping into a family that had known such loss. She talked about the sacred duty of becoming a mother. "And to my precious Sam," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she looked over at him, "you have opened my heart in ways I never thought possible. I promise to always, always protect you." The room burst into applause. People were wiping their eyes. My son looked at her as if she were a saint. And as the applause began to die down, before the best man could stand up, I made my move. I rose from my chair. I didn't do it quickly. I did it with a slow, deliberate grace that made the simple act of standing feel significant. A few heads turned, then a few more. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, waiting, until the room fell completely silent. "That was a beautiful speech, Chloe," I said, my voice clear and calm, carrying easily through the quiet room. "And I'd like to propose one final toast." I picked up my phone and walked toward the head table. I could feel every eye in the room on me. I saw the flash of annoyance in Chloe's face, quickly masked by a polite smile. I saw the confusion on Mark's. I walked past them to the small table that held the laptop and the projector they had used earlier for a photo slideshow. With steady hands, I plugged my phone into the adapter. "A few weeks ago," I said, my back to the room as I worked, "Dr. Evans, Sam's lung specialist, asked him to participate in a new medical study. He's been wearing a special device tonight, a new kind of health monitor." I turned back to face the room. My phone's screen was now displayed on the huge projector screen behind the head table. On it was the app, with its simple damning graph. I pointed to the long, flat green line. "This is the data from the sensor. As you can see, for the last 2 hours, the air quality around my grandson has been excellent. Clean, safe mountain air." I let that sink in for a moment. The room was utterly still. Then I pointed to the terrifying red spike that was still on the screen. "And this," I said, my voice dropping just a little, "is the air he was breathing exactly 5 minutes ago." A collective gasp went through the room. I saw Mark's eyes go from the screen, to Sam, and then to me, his face a canvas of disbelief. Chloe had gone completely white. I turned to look directly at her, the woman who had promised to protect my grandson. "It's time," stamped to the exact moment you came back from the restroom and gave him that big, loving hug. I let the accusation hang in the dead silent air for a full 10 seconds. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. The data was doing all the screaming for me. I raised my glass of water. "To the truth," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that felt like a bell. "Because the data doesn't lie." The silence that followed my toast was the loudest thing I had ever heard. For a full minute, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire room, 100 guests, my son, his fiancée, was held hostage by that single brutal image on the projector screen. It was just a simple line graph, but it was more damning than any photograph, more vicious than any accusation. That angry red spike, glowing in the dim light of the dining room, was the shape of a lie. It was the shape of cruelty disguised as love. Then, the whispers started. A low murmur rippled through the room as people turned to each other, their faces a mixture of confusion, pity, and a kind of horrified fascination. You could feel the festive energy of the party curdle and die, replaced by the awkward, heavy atmosphere of a public disaster. The performance was over. Chloe was the first to break. She let out a laugh, a sound so high and brittle it was like a glass shattering. Is this a joke?" she asked the room, her eyes wide and frantic. "What is this?" She turned to me, and the mask of the loving bride was gone, replaced by a snarl. You did this," she hissed, her voice rising with each word. "This is insane. You set me up. You have hated me from the very beginning, you miserable old woman." I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, my glass of water still in my hand, and let her scream. I had presented my evidence. Now I was letting her present hers. Every shrill accusation, every panicked denial, was just another nail in her own coffin. My silence was a mirror, and in it, everyone was finally seeing her true face. "Mark!" she shrieked, turning to my son, her hands reaching for him in a desperate plea. "Baby, you're not going to let her do this, are you? Tell them she's crazy." But Mark wasn't looking at her. He wasn't even looking at me. His gaze was fixed on that red spike on the screen. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, the memories clicking into place one by one, forming a new, terrible picture. His face, which moments before had been full of love and happiness, was now ashen. The wall of denial I had crashed against for months was crumbling before my eyes. "The hairspray," he whispered, so quietly I could barely hear him. "At the book fair." He couldn't stop coughing. He looked down at the table, his eyes unfocused. The pillow missed. He was sick all night. He looked up, his gaze finally landing on Chloe, but it was the look a stranger gives you. The adoration was gone, burned away by the cold, hard data on the screen. The man who had been her fiancé a moment ago was now her judge. "Chloe," he said, his voice flat and hollow, "what have you been doing?" Seeing that she was losing him, she switched tactics. The rage vanished, replaced by a flood of tears. She collapsed into her chair, her shoulders shaking with dramatic, gulping sobs. "Mark, no baby, you can't believe her. It's a misunderstanding. It's just my perfume. I would never ever hurt him, you know that." She was playing her last card, the victim. "She's just jealous. She's trying to ruin us." But it was too late. The performance was no longer believable. Mark didn't move to comfort her. He didn't even seem to hear her. He slowly pushed his chair back and walked over to the table where Sam was sitting, now looking small and scared, his eyes wide as he watched the drama unfold. My son knelt in front of his son, ignoring the 100 pairs of eyes on him. He gently took Sam's little wrist in his hand and, with a surgeon's care, unfastened the strap of the air quality monitor. He held the small black device in the palm of his hand, staring at it as if it were a bomb he had failed to defuse. He stood up, the device still in his hand, and he finally looked at the weeping woman at the head table, the woman he was supposed to marry the next day. All the conflict, all the denial, was gone from his face. All that was left was a quiet, dead certainty. "The wedding is off," he said. The words weren't loud, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. Chloe's sobs stopped abruptly, replaced by a raw, ugly gasp of disbelief. It wasn't the sound of a broken heart. It was the sound of a failed business deal, the sound of an investment gone bust. That was the end. The guests, mortified, began to quietly rise. There were no goodbyes. They just grabbed their coats and purses, their eyes fixed on the floor, and melted away into the night, leaving a wake of half-empty glasses and plates of expensive, uneaten dessert. The room, once so full of laughter and music, was now cavernously empty. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and Chloe's ragged breathing. The big, beautiful lie was in ruins. Mark stood with his hand on Sam's shoulder, a silent statue of a father finally woken up. Chloe was a crumpled heap of white silk and shattered illusions. And I stood there, watching the wreckage, feeling no joy, no triumph, just the profound, aching sadness of a necessary demolition. The image wasn't just shattered, it had been ground into dust. Annihilation is a quiet thing. After the bomb of truth goes off, what's left is just a ringing silence and the slow settling of dust. In the days that followed that disastrous rehearsal dinner, my house was a silent refuge. Chloe, as I'd expected, vanished. One day her vibrant, perfect life was all over the internet. The next, her accounts were deleted. She was a digital ghost, erased as easily as a bad photo. There were no angry phone calls, no dramatic confrontations. She and her manufactured image simply ceased to exist in our world. The silence from my son, however, was heavier. For 2 weeks, our only interactions were stiff, awkward handoffs of my grandson in my driveway. Mark wouldn't meet my eye. He looked gaunt, haunted by a public humiliation and a private shame that I knew must be eating him alive. I didn't push. I just gave him and Sam a safe, quiet place to land. A fortress of normalcy with grilled cheese sandwiches and cartoons on Saturday mornings. He needed time to sift through the wreckage and figure out what was real and what was just part of the show. The first sign that the healing had begun came not from Mark, but from Sam. About a week after that night, I was in the kitchen, and I heard it. A sound I hadn't realized I'd missed so desperately. It was the sound of my grandson's full-bellied, carefree laughter. He was in the backyard chasing a soccer ball, his cheeks flushed with joy, his breathing deep and easy. There was no wheezing, no coughing, no lethargy. The poison was gone, and the real child was emerging again, vibrant and healthy. That sound was my victory. It was the only proof I ever really needed that I had done the right thing. Then, one Saturday morning, Mark didn't just drop Sam off. He walked him to the door and, for the first time in weeks, stepped inside. He looked tired, but the haunted look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet sorrow. "Can I have a cup of your coffee, Mom?" he asked. I poured him a mug without a word, and we stood in the comfortable silence of my kitchen. He wandered into the living room, his gaze sweeping over the familiar furniture, the photos on the wall. His eyes landed on the mantelpiece, and he walked over to it. He reached out and picked up the small, hand-carved wooden bird. He held it in his palm, turning it over and over, feeling its solid, simple weight. "Dad spent a whole winter on this, didn't he?" he said, his voice thick. "He wanted it to be perfect for Sarah." "He did," I said softly. He was quiet for a long time, just staring at the bird. It was more than a piece of wood. It was a symbol of everything he had almost thrown away for a pretty picture. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, his back still to me. His shoulders started to shake. He finally turned to face me, and his eyes were full of tears. It wasn't the anger I'd seen in the coffee shop, or the denial. It was just pure, unfiltered grief and regret. "You tried to tell me. You tried to show me, and I wouldn't look." He shook his head, a look of self-disgust on his face. "I wanted it so badly, you know? The perfect new life, the happy family. I chose to see a picture instead of the person. I chose the lie because it was easier." He took a ragged breath. "I failed him, Mom. I failed Sam. I failed Sarah's memory. And I failed you." I walked over and took the coffee cup from his trembling hand. I put my arms around my son, my tall, grown-up son, and held him while he cried. There was no "I told you so." There was no anger left. Only forgiveness. "You were hurt, Mark," I whispered into his hair, "and you wanted to heal. Now we can, the right way." And we did. It was slow, and it was quiet. It wasn't a dramatic movie scene, but a series of small, ordinary moments. It was Mark showing up for a parent-teacher conference. It was the three of us having a pizza and movie night, falling asleep on the couch. It was the return of inside jokes and easy laughter. It was the slow, steady rebuilding of trust, of a home. Last weekend, we went for a hike. We drove up into the mountains, to the very trail where his father had found the piece of aspen that became Sarah's bird. The air was cool and clean, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. Sam, now full of boundless energy, ran ahead, his happy shouts echoing through the massive, silent trees. Mark and I walked side by side, our boots crunching on the trail. There were no cameras, no poses, no captions. There was no need to perform happiness for an audience, because for the first time in a long time, the happiness was real. It was earned. It was ours. Watching my grandson scramble up a small hill, his lungs strong, his body healthy, I finally felt the last of the tension in my shoulders release. He was safe, he was happy, he was breathing easy. I've learned that a family isn't something you build for show. It's not about the perfect pictures you post, it's about the quiet promises you keep, day after day. It's about the legacy of love you protect. And sometimes, it's about having the courage to fight for the very air your loved ones breathe. So let me ask you, when you see a perfect picture, do you ever stop to wonder what's really going on behind the filter? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories give us strength. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding the truth in the hardest of times.